Fat Boys, week 13 just passed us by, which now we know what that means. Week 14 is up ahead. Why is week 14 in the recesses of your mind? Last week of the regular season. Really important. A lot of things going on. But before we get to week 14, let's pay some homage to week 13. We had some massive scores. Wide receivers seemed to love this week. Some of us did, and some of us definitely did not. All of our scores are going to matter because, as you know, we are very much based on the tie principle of how many you can score. So everything that happened, you're at that point of the year where you are not just paying attention to your matchup, you're paying attention to at least 2 or 3 or 4 other matchups to see how they roll down. So let's get to some major stories in the NFL, and then I can barely hold myself in weight here. Let's get to our matchups as we shape into our playoff picture. Each of the last 2 weeks, I've started this segment by saying, I'm going to go a little shorter this week because blah, 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 blah. I think what really happened was a couple weeks ago, I went way too long. And since then, I've been trying to find that happy little medium. When I started this, I thought this would be a 3 to 5 minute segment, but we're talking about me here. So if I can get it under the 3 to 5, we're doing well. I am going to shoot for that because I do actually want to talk more about the leagues themselves, because we're getting to that point. But I wanted to talk about one big thing that will inevitably end up in a rant for me. I apologize. I've been avoiding talking about the referees, and I've been doing it mostly because there's no real point. And as someone who's coached a ton, I mean, each sport brings on its little different elements and the things that actually make you mad. For instance, in volleyball in a practice, I have no problem refereeing that. Or, in baseball, I think the expectation is you mess up a lot of the time. That's why we know that umpires have certain strike zones, even though they're not supposed to, and robot umpires will be the better whatever. But it's part of the nuances of the game. Basketball, you just can't pay me enough money to be a referee. I feel like every basketball coach that's ever existed has just a disdain, and you just hear nothing but negative comments, to the extent that if I have ever had a team where near the end of the year, the parents and the players like, let's do a parent-player game, coach can ref. I'm like, that's why you have assistants. Get in there. Even my last full-out refereeing of a full game was with the person in the picture on the YouTube page. Dirk Nowitzki was visiting ISK. It's a long, long, awesome story. But effectively, we didn't have a pumped-up adult male-sized basketball to do some of the shooting things we wanted to go and participate in. I'm just going to let that comment sit. We ended up refereeing a game together with the ex-varsity players from both sides, girls and guys co-ed game, and I missed a call because I was staring at Dirk Nowitzki, so no blame. But referees in general can take a lot of heat, and I think in football it's tough, but on the Thursday night and the Sunday night games, a few things were highlighted. I want to go through them as quick as I can here. On the Thursday night game, the biggest thing is, as someone who's occupationally fluid, let's say, I've been able to get up and watch some games or rewatch parts of games or highlights or whatever. And that one, the flags just took me out of it. There were so many flags, so many penalties. I was just done with it by the end. And it almost became a joke. I think even Collinsworth, Al Michaels in that case, made a comment about it being like, oh, of course, like what else can go on? What else is new? I think was his actual line. But the Sunday nighter, the KC Green Bay, proposed a couple really interesting ones, right? We had the Mahomes play where he was going out of bounds, but hadn't gone out yet and got shoved. They called it roughing the passer, which I know is the trend right now. We're more into player safety. And even people like Michael Schur commented on it. But he's someone in the past, he's done like Community and The Good Place, and he's a showrunner for a lot of those, or producer, I think, in those TV shows. Has effectively said American civilization won't go forward until we get rid of all combat sports. But there's kind of return on the other end. MMA is making a big push. They had a huge COVID because they were allowed to go offshore and do what they wanted to do. Clearly, there's a desire for it. Hockey still has fighting. So football is in that gray area. So I think that was an interesting one just because that caused a lot of issues. Even if we do deal with what's allowed and what's not allowed for physical contact, we saw with Pacheco was getting ragdolled on the ground and spun around, but he got up and threw a very aimless punch. But because it was a punch, he's kicked out of the game immediately. Again, he should play hockey. We take breaks to have fights in that sport. But people have helmets on. Like, there was no actual chance of injury in that. Just getting your helmet shook around like a mofo is actually way more challenging. Or just legal hits that can blow up your ACL. Those are damaging. With pads and a helmet, like, what are you really going to do? I was a left, I should have gone, but you get what I mean. But the two big ones with pass interference at the end, I think that's the one that got the most attention. And I hate it because by attention, I of course mean Twitter trolls that have nothing else better to do with their life than just post stuff. But if you actually look at like NFL analysts that kind of know what they're talking about and have experience either by studying the game or playing the game, because I do think both have validity, there was a little bit of confusion, and I think it's kind of interesting what gets more attention. So there's the obvious MVS on that deep ball, and he just got straight up tackled before he touched the ball. It seemed like a very easy pass interference. And to me, instead of arguing the play, it brings out the question I've had, and I know I've Googled the answer, but why can't the coaches challenge a pass interference call? It could be like baseball. They called in New York, and so it's out of their hands. There's this stubbornness that, our subjectivity, and I know that's why, by the way, that's the defense they say. The whole game is subjective. Even holding is a ridiculous, like, Ponzi scheme, but they want to keep it within the ref's purview so that it's consistency, but it's not. I mean, in that particular case, it was obvious. If you called ahead and went to an external body, I can't see a world where they don't call that. So it would get rid of some of that angst and actually, I think, alleviate the pressure on the referees. But there's this macho kind of can't make me change my mind attitude, which is honestly kind of ridiculous. I mean, it really is in NFL. I guess it's a lot like many societies. If you draw that line in the sand, you got to be careful, because then people argue about how you made that line, not the spirit by which you made that decision, right? And nuance is very rarely taken in. That's why we listen to charters that are a couple hundred years old, word by word, even though, like, they didn't have like fridges and stuff there, let alone the technology we have now. So anyway, I think it's an interesting, bigger concept call because there's no way. There's 360 views in the field. We've got camera angles of everything. At some point in time, they're going to turn those decisions over, and you're going to be allowed to challenge them. I guess it's just a matter of when. Now, it didn't necessarily cost the game, because the Chiefs had to full out score the touchdown and I believe the 2-point conversion just to extend it. So it's not like it cost, but compare that to the Hail Mary, where again, Kelsey was just rocked and shoved before he caught the ball, but no one has a problem with that. And I think basketball's in the same vein, where sometimes it's really odd that at the end of a game, we allow for a different set of rules. Like if that was like a 30-yard pass and he got hit in the end zone, it's like, oh, you got to call that. But because it was a Hail Mary, I mean, it was still a throw. It was still a play that was within the time limitations, but we just know that you don't call that one. It's like, basketball, that when you get into penalties, more often than not, and foul calls, by the way, penalty shots don't exist in basketball. Although free throw competition, I have seen a middle school game go down to free throws because no one could score. That's a whole other story. But it's interesting that the end of a game changes that notation. So if you know the team is fouling, referees almost call in advance. Or the exact opposite, end of a game, you can pretty much stab someone in the paint because the ref doesn't want to make that call to decide the game. Maybe in these sports, we should develop a 20-second purge whistle. So with 20 seconds left, you blow the whistle and then just whatever the hell you want to do goes. I don't know. That's a little gladiatorial, but might work. Anyway, other than the ejections, if you want to see the funny ejection, go just Google Dom in Philadelphia and you can see the security guard. I'm not even going to touch that, but just Google it. It's funny. The guy was wearing perfect sunglasses. It's almost like it was staged. Anyway, on to our leagues, which I said I wanted to talk about. Just before we get to our individual leagues, I've always kind of mentioned the buys here. I believe it's our last week of bye week, so woohoo! And it's Arizona and Washington, and no offense, if you were depending on those two, you're probably in trouble anyway. There's only a handful of players that probably cost people a lot. So aside from injuries, which there were still a bunch I'll get to. I mean, Seattle's running back situation is foggy, and we just came from a Monday nighter that if you are depending on Trevor Lawrence, and you can tell by my face that in some places I am, walking boots are never good. I haven't heard of the decision yet. They don't know how bad it is, but I'm nervous to look. Anyway, this week is a fairly standard one, except for those 2 bye weeks, and we have 2 Monday Night Football games, because why not? I mean, neither one of them are supposed to be good, but why not? Anywho, our leagues are getting intense. We got to focus on them. So let's get to what happened in week 13. I'm sure as Will is pumping the what does it take to be number one as he's flying down on his way to and from school, or maybe just running around campus in Korea celebrating. 182 is a monster score, and I mean, he spiked the ball. I don't want to make any references that I'm ignorant to with Korean culture. I know it's very respect-based. What is the appropriate measure of beating somebody else by over 100 points? Do you get to name the next born child if he has another one? Is that is that something that's underneath in the contract that you had to sign? I'm not really sure. Sorry, Justin, I'm not trying to dogpile on you, buddy. You had some bad luck. Tank Dell got hurt. I thought Moss was going to go off too. Dylan actually looked like he was going to get so much love. He just didn't get any of the scores. That was all reserved for the wide receivers. Dallas has obviously been a league winner for you, and for them to just get run over by the Seahawks on Thursday. But you look at your bench, right? Big three, possibly fourth here. I know you haven't really been depending on Jones because he's been hurt so much this year, but this big three have carried you through, and they were gone. You knew you'd be a little bit soft this week, but I didn't think you expected to be this soft. And Will, I don't want to make any other weird references, but you were the opposite of soft, my friend. Now, Herbert sucked, but in that New England game that was all kind of crappy, I guess you just were lucky to get out of it without a massive injury because some other people did not. Not maybe so lucky on Henry on that one. He did get concussion protocol, but let's see how that rolls. But speaking of Henry, he was the running back 3, so that's not too shabby. Miami, defense 4, and the reason why I'm building up to this, you had a couple number ones, right? Deebo Samuel, huge in your flex. He was our wide receiver 1, only to be followed by Evans, who was the wide receiver 5. And as you can see, the point differential, Chase was 6. I mean, there's decimal points between them, so you'd be pretty happy with the Monday Nighter. You didn't need it, but it's good to have, right? And right now, with all of our situations, points for and against, or not for and against, I keep saying that, points for are going to matter. Laporta as well, coming out, huge performance. Looking like a miniature version of Gronk. He was our tight end 1. So you were swimming in it this week, Will. It's nice to have it all at the same time. Like I said, you don't have to feel like the points were for nothing. You know that this is going to come down to points for that are going to dictate spots. This really helps cement your spot as the top 4. So congrats on that one. Justin, you're still second, buddy. You just had a bad week. You got put through the bye week. And yeah, if you have another kid, Will gets to name it. I'm sorry, but that's just the way it is. Maybe it wasn't for 180, but Jake's 165, not too shabby. It really does help him cement as the number 1 spot right now, so he's got to be feeling pretty good about that. John, you over-predicted. I mean, there's not much you can do on this one. I mean, you definitely went over your predicted, but just not as much as he did. Now, how he managed... Purdy was our quarterback 2, although I don't think anyone started Geno. He was our quarterback 1, so quarterback 1 might as well be. And then it's some of the usual suspects here. Hill going off with what I think should be an MVP season, if not fantasy MVP, actual real MVP too. He was our wide receiver 3, though. This was a pretty big wide receiver week in general. The ceiling was quite high. Ingram was our tight end 3, big tight end week in general. And Dallas was our top kicker and the top kicker. Sometimes we don't start the kicker. That's number 1. So in this case, that was quite nice. Now, you did drop another tight end who would have been your namesake, was actually tight end 4. No one picked him up, so he's still sitting there for anyone who wants a little Fergie. You can go right ahead. Waylon, like I said, unlucky. You did have a bagel in Otten. Etienne did fine for you, and Pacheco did great. I also loved his left hook. That was pretty cool. And your huge pickup, I think you're just doing this whole thing where you're going against your team, so at least if New England's going to suck, and that they did suck. That was a horrible game. I don't know if you actually made it through more than a quarter. Weather did factor in, but so did general suckiness. But at least you benefited. You got 23 points. They were the 3rd high-scoring defense. No one took the 2nd high-scoring defense. That was Indy. And if anyone's watched the botched punts, the fumble punts, people are making acronyms of that yeah, I'm not going to try and say it. I'll get kicked off YouTube. But well done there, sir. Great pickup. If you look at the benches here just quickly, yes, you had Dax, who was actually our quarterback 3. That would have helped you out for sure, but it's not going to make up for the difference. So if you feel good by benching him, you or someone else who had a rough bye week, this was Buyapalooza. So both of you will be looking forward to getting your starting rosters completely back. And for what it's worth, Jake Connor did crack the top 5 this week on running back, so he might have given you a little help there. But that's just more decisions you got to make for next week. I hope you make all the wrong ones, and you'll see why when I get to the end. In what didn't look like it was going to be a close match, and then Horst made it a real close match, we went after it here. I took it by just under 20 points, but there was a time when I was supposed to take it by a bit more, and then Horst made a very uncomfortable comeback. How did he do so? The Philly connection helped him out again. Smith is just showing that he just tends to get the love at the end of the year when they just double down on Brown. Hurts did fine. I mean, against San Francisco, to be honest, though, this was a huge performance by both, because San Francisco has shut out a lot of teams or really made it difficult. Especially Kevin came out on the Thursday and had a stinker where he put Seattle's defense in, and that really didn't help him out. I think Running back issues also can be something of an issue, and we keep alluding to it, but the potential return of his wide receiver one couldn't happen at a better time, although wide receivers don't really seem to be your problem right now. Pittman also having a pretty great game. For me, it's a good and the bad. I mean, Kamara was great. He was running back 2 and great across multiple formats for me. Atlanta I picked up and was the number 1 defense, so that was pretty good. I did have Nico on my bench, and he was the wide receiver 4, so it's nice to know I have some depth there. The biggest thing for me, this isn't a super flex league, so obviously there's quarterbacks that you can get, but Lawrence was looking so good for the past couple weeks, and I did get a bit of an update between when I filmed the NFL segment and now. It's not a definitive one. It is looking like it's not a season-ending injury, but it might be a fantasy season-ending injury. It looks like it's going to be at least a couple weeks before he's back to full mobility. They don't know 100% yet, hence the questionable. They're still saying they're doing tests. But, I mean, he ran for a touchdown in this game as well. I don't think he'll be doing that if he comes back. His mobility has been great. I mean, he still had most of a fourth quarter to play. He would have cracked 300 yards again, likely, had he stayed in, possibly another touchdown. He's been monster for me the last couple weeks, and looks like I'm going to lose him, so I hate fantasy sports. Anyway, I am happy I won, so sorry, Horst. But hey, technically as of now, as it stands, we are both in the playoffs. Don't know if that's going to hold one more week. Ben spiking the ball, whereas maybe you didn't win by 100, but you almost doubled. Now, for Chaz, I don't know, man. I keep giving the same kind of speech. Cool that Cup did something finally. That's pretty good. And A.J. Brown, your receiver's looking good. You did have a bye week, but just kind of crap across the board here, unfortunately. Your running backs really let you down. Tight end didn't do a whole lot for you. And hey, I had Jacksonville in another league too. I thought against Cincy's quarterback, who was our quarterback 4, in Browning. I don't think anyone saw that one coming, but it certainly, I was going to say came, but that sounds weird. In terms of Ben, you got to be pretty happy that Achane came back, and he's going to give you some support here. Now, he did take some love away from your other running back, but collectively, your 3 running backs were your strength. DK Metcalf, though, came out on that Thursday. You got to love when it happens on Thursday, and you get days to feel great about it. He was our wide receiver 2 next to Debo. He didn't quite crack it there. Your anus of a kicker would have been a bit better had he hit that last field goal. That would have helped you out, but you didn't need it. 140 is a good score, and certainly I don't think you were sweating it going into the Monday night. So Ben, you're looking good, like you're heading into the playoffs. I don't know. We'll look in a second to see if you can maybe sneak into that top 2 and get the bye, but Chaz, keep fighting, brother. Speaking about continuing to fight, Mark, I almost called you, man. You gotta dress a roster here. I mean, I get the kicker, I guess, but come on, man. You had a wide receiver, but you lucked it out because your Monday nighter was big. Now, maybe you were just busy because I did notice you moved some stuff around. Mixon and McBride, Pollard, and Howell. Sure, enough to win. Because unfortunately, on the other side, you were facing someone with a ton of bad luck here. Now, I should just say, Mixon, I'm shrugging it off, but that was a monster Monday nighter. I think Brendan was probably optimistic that maybe he'd squeak this out. But Mixon was our running back 1 this week, so that kind of helped you out. B, you got to be happy with your quarterback performance. It was right where it should be. Your wide receiver performance is great. Now, Watson did have that weird kneel where now he's apparently could be hurt. Stevenson had to leave the field early. That cost you for sure. And I guess on your bench, you did have Pakanakua. So if Watson's hurt, you do have a supplement for him. But, Robinson's on a bye. You have Moore coming in. You have Fields. So you're not out of it, but you definitely hit a little bit of the injury bug this week. So that was partially the reason why you were so unsuccessful. And Kansas City's D, I think you expected a lot more of them against Green Bay. You didn't really sink that far below the line, but had you had a normal week for you, you would have squeaked this one out. And I think that would have helped your playoff bit. So how exactly that impacts the playoffs, let's take a quick look. As I said, lots on the move here, lots of things on the go, so the playoff picture did become a little bit clearer. Now, here's the tough part. Chaz is definitely out. Now, technically, Waylon and Mark, you are 1 game off of the 6th spot here, so it would come down to points scored. Now, Mark, it would be very tough. You would need a lot of people to lose, and you to score a ton, but mathematically, technically, it might be possible depending on matchups. Waylon, you have a little bit less. I mean, you only really need kind of Brendan to lose, and then either me or Kevin to lose, and then you need to make sure you've outscored us. So I'm a little bit beyond, but if you put in a monster and Kevin really sinks it, you do technically have a shot. And for us here, obviously, we're in a tie, so it really comes down to what we do this week. So it looks like, unless there's a massive score, if I win, I'm probably through. Now, technically, again, if we all win and Will wins, he's got points on all of us, so he should technically be in. I think, Will, this wasn't exactly a clinching performance, but it's pretty damn close with your score. I think you put yourself in a really good spot. You would have to really honk it, not score a lot of points, and have a couple of us go off. And then Ben, obviously, you get the nod here. Now, you do technically, if you win and Justin loses, you could sneak into that number 2 spot, which does get you the bye. Jake, I think you've clinched it. I think you've got the number 1 seed again, which you know there is a financial benefit to doing so, which I will send a message this week about some of the financials. And just to be clear, since we are a top 6 team, you know this is the last week of the season. This is where it all comes in. This is the current playoff picture as it looks right now, but like I said, we still have some mobility in our spots here. So I would say our top 4 is pretty set. Will, I'm not jinxing you. It would take honestly something super crazy for it not to happen. So I'm not declaring you in. I just say I think you're sleeping a lot better than Horst, B, Waylon, Mark, and myself. And like I said, I think Waylon and Mark do need a lot of help to kind of squish their way in. But hey, there's a chip in a chair, willing away, right? So this is it, folks. This is the last game of the season. Dress your rosters. Don't be that person. Make sure that you go. Why? Because we do have some people playing the lower end, and we need an honest week. So looking at week 14 in our matchups, I do not get the easy seed against Jake, so it is very likely I'm not looking good, especially with my quarterback injury. Will, you could put Waylon out for sure and spike the ball. Chaz, if you don't care and Horst gets in, but I know you care. You're a competitor at heart. You want to take Horst down. You want to be the reason he doesn't get into the playoffs. Ben, same, man. You actually need this against Brendan to get that top 2 spot. Brendan, you need this game, so you got to come out all guns a-blazing. And Justin, you want to make sure that Ben doesn't get a chance to do so. You want to earn that second spot by putting Mark down, whether he starts a kicker or not. So every matchup should technically have a bearing. Jake, you're fine, though. If you want to take the week off, buddy, no one would blame you for it. I mean, you already got the number 1 locked up. I mean, tight ends, start them, don't start them. I don't know. Actually, no, you know what? With my luck, me saying that, you wouldn't put a tight end in, and then you beat me, and I feel more like a jerk. We know the situation at this point. We've been in it long enough. This is the exciting part. This is where we find out who's still in the running. We've had 6 seeds go on to win the whole thing before, so it's just getting into that playoffs, and there's a lot of us that still have a chance. So I'm going to say best of luck. You can tell by my eyes I don't mean it, but super pumped for week 14, dudes. Can't wait.